Hello, everyone, and welcome to this live stream. This is going to be a fun chat over the next, well, we'll see how long it goes on for, but we have probably around 45 minutes or so to talk about some really nice AI dev tools in our ecosystem today with some very, very smart and friendly people. This is going to be, I'm sure, a very fun and good conversation. So to just let a few people who are watching live aware of a few things, you can ask questions if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn, and we can pull those questions directly in on screen. So if you have any opinions, if you want to chat with the guests, please do make sure you ask those questions. This will be available offline as well, so we'll make sure that this recording is available soon after. So with that, let me bring a few people on stage and do some introductions. Why don't we do one at a time? Let's bring Amir Shvat on first. Hey, Amir, how's it going?
Great, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's absolutely a pleasure. And Amir, you're in Austin right now.
I'm in Austin, Texas. Yes,
you're in Austin, Texas. And I've known you for a while, Amir, and I felt very bad that the other day I went to Austin and I completely forgot you were there, and we should have met up, but that's on me. So apologies for that.
Next
Amir.
time.
Let's introduce you, Amir. Amir, you are an early stage investor. You're a general partner at Dark Mode Ventures. Previously, you have a long history of amazing companies that you've worked for. CPO at Reshuffle HQ, which were acquired by Twitter, VP of product at Twitch, Slack, Google, and many, many more as well. Amir, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
And I think it's going to be interesting to hear your, the VC angle, because you have an incredible breadth of knowledge across a wide range of dev tools from early stage, which is super important at this stage. So a big welcome, Amir.
Awesome.
Also joining us on stage is Tracy Benon. How are you, Tracy?
I am doing well. Thanks for the invite. I'm looking forward to this conversation today.
Oh, absolutely. No problem at all. As soon as I was chatting with Patrick, who I'll introduce in just a second, and I was talking with him about who should we have on stage to chat about this. And straight away, Patrick was, we absolutely need Tracy to chat about this because she's got some great insight. So Tracy is a senior principal software architect and researcher at the well-known MITRE and host of the Real Technologists podcast. Did I get that right, Trace?
You did.
Awesome, wonderful, and last but by no means least, there we go. That's a nicer orientation for the videos. Patrick Debois. Patrick, do you need an intro, Patrick? From what I understand, you're pretty infamous.
Yeah, some people call me kind of the big sister of DevOps, but I can live with that.
So Patrick is a content curator at the AI Native Dev community, ainativedev.io, and father of DevOps, which is a wonderful title. That, however fast you try and run from it, Patrick, it will catch up with you and stick with you.
Yes.
But Patrick, as one of the things that you've recently done, you curated the wonderful landscape, AI Native Dev landscape. Why don't I bring that up on screen first of all? This is kind of a little bit of what we'll talk about through this episode. This was the landscape that you created. Talk us through why you created it, what it is, and how people can use it.
Yeah, I've lived through some histories of new technologies, and every time new technology comes out, there is this crazy period about new tools. Everybody wants to be first. Everybody wants to be the best. Everyone want to grab the money as well, right? Amir will talk about that too. And you feel that you see all these tools on social media, but there's no spot to find this and kind of the one place to go to. So that was definitely one of the reasons why we did the landscape is, where do you keep up to date with this instead of just waiting and like having to score the internet and all kind of the weird forums for this? So that was predominantly the reason. And then the second part was, well, there's always newcomers and new things that are happening. And because when we put them in the landscape and you see kind of the new kids on the block, it's always nice to see trends, like what is kind of changing and what is kind of emerging from that. we kind of put these together, 280 tools, and we kind of, they just keep coming. But yeah, it's a nice way of sharing what we know, what we find while searching the internet.
Awesome. And there's a lot of work that's gone into this in terms of the curation, categorizing correctly, giving them each, I guess, a primary category versus kind of like, listing them all in many, many different spaces. How hard was that? Because I guess a lot of tools do cover many of these categories.
You know that saying, like, naming is hard is one of the hardest problems in our industry. Like, putting things in categories, like emerging tools, is turned out to be pretty hard. I'll give the example. Imagine we create a category which is, coding IDEs. Okay, you can put a bunch of the tools in there, and then all of a sudden you see like a new trend, and it's like, oh, one has agent. Okay, but do I create now a new category, or do I just wait for all the others to have agents? So part of the challenge was, initially maybe we looked more at features, like A can do that, B can do that. But eventually we settled on maybe a more known pattern, and we bucket them into existing tasks, existing workflows, existing roles, because then people can relate to this, like, how do we improve kind of my tasks that I'm currently working on, and kind of find it back on there. So that's why we settled on this format, being it from the product owner, product engineer, to the developer, the tester, all the way up to DevOps, DevSecOps, and even the AI engineer has some pieces in there if you're an AI thinker.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to ask a question, and perhaps we start with you here, Amir. Since in the VC world, I'm sure you see hundreds of different products, AI and others. I guess my question is the AI dev tools already saturated? Because they seem to be coming in one every day, one every couple of days. Is there space for this many tools?
So I don't think it's a greenfield anymore. I think that we have a lot of dev tools now, and every category, from testing to performance to cost management, to everybody's trying to innovate across. The question that I ask myself as an investor is, like, from a user perspective, is it too much? And do all these tools integrate with each other in a delightful way? And if they're not integrating in a delightful way, is there a place where we're going to see consolidation? And we're starting to see that now, where big players are starting to acquire smaller players. But I think the way I went through a few innovation cycles, like the mobile and many and the web, even, to date myself. But you see something happens, a technology changes, tons of innovation, many startups trying to solve multiple things in the domain, and then most do not survive or get consolidated by the big players. And what you get back is a set of very few tools that are amazing, that solve a very big problem. And my job is to find those that are actually doing that. So when I see all these stack, I'm asking myself, is there a person that has AI throughout the stack? And is that stack well integrated? Do the tools talk to each other? Is the user experience great? And is there something big that is missing? And as a person that loves APIs, is like, are all these tools integrated through like good APIs? The answer is, right now, I don't know, and I don't think so, but I think that's a direction where the market will go.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tracy, from your point of view, I guess the consolidation is really core here. There'll be a number of things whereby people will think, well, a number of aspects here, they just need to be good enough, whereas these core things need to be my primary things. How much do you think there's going to be kind of like a number of categories that are just going to be eliminated, and you'll get larger categories essentially versus very specific categories?
I think we're going to see a number of different things change. And I'll start by saying, like, this is my own opinion, so I'm not representing MITRE right now. This is not a formal opinion on MITRE's behalf. This is based on my years of research and what I've been doing. Prior to MITRE, I was with global consultancies leading their software architecture and modern software practices. When I look at what we have right now, we have what I call AI as a tool. And if you look at this amazing landscape, right, that we just presented, there are dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens of tools. And to Amir's point, they are point items. Somebody has a great idea for how they can help with requirements. Someone else has another idea how they can help with specifically with unit testing or automating aspects of end-to-end testing from a black box perspective, right? The beautiful things that people are coming up with, and that bifurcation for right now causes that complexity. If you think about the entire software development lifecycle and you think about all the roles and all the individuals and all the tasks, if we're adding AI in on different task areas, we're actually making a little bit more difficult right now. So Amir is spot on. What does it mean to start to integrate these tools in a way that is holistic? Because the reason that we do software the way that we do right now is because we were dealing with humans. Humans are the core of software engineering right now. And so we've optimized everything that we do for them, even the way that we've talked about the SDLC when we talk about the DevOps continuum, right? All of the different chevrons that are on that. But what's going to happen? Are we going to get to one mega tool? Probably not. But we are going to see an appropriate consolidation, especially when we think about the need for there to be data that's shared between these sessions. If I turn around and I'm using one chat dev kind of an interface and I'm going back and forth between that interaction that I had, that's beautiful and that's rich information. But I go over here and I work on an AI-infused testing tool, and I might not have that same session. So there are these silos at the minute, and I say that very specifically, there's silos at the minute as we're starting to see better integration of these things. To the point Patrick made, when you look at some of these, like if I think about windsurf, if I think about it was Open Devon, then became Open Hands, right? There are some amazing things that are happening with providing an environment that has multiple AI agents. And that's the game changer, is moving from AI as a tool to having AI as a team member. And agency helps us to get there. Now, I'm not going to keep going because I'll take 45 minutes to talk to you about what I think is going to happen long term. And the future consolidation is not going to be around the tools. It's going to be around that digital platform that provides everything that we need. So there you go. That's we're going to see a consolidation. But right now, I love that we see so much pop up because it means people are thinking. Right? There are new ideas that are coming out, and what we should see rise to the top are the cream of the cream ideas.
Yeah. And actually, Richard, if I can bring a comment here from Richard in saying he loves that there's already hundreds of tools. And I kind of like wonder, actually, I'd love to actually stop that sentence just there. I love that there are already hundreds of tools. From my point of view, I think, oh my God, there's hundreds of tools. Like, where do I start as a developer? Like thinking about all of these tools. How do I even think about which ones to trial, which ones to invest time? Because each one of these tools takes a level of investment to understand if they're even good for me, my organization, if they're as useful as they say they are on the tin. And of course, that's before we even then start piecing those workflows together, as Robert mentioned. How do we, when we think about what areas as developers to start introducing AI into our organizations or into our workflows rather, how do we even think about the process of that? Is it going from a pain point of view first? Is it trying to work out where AI is most reliable today? What's the process, would you say? Why don't we start, Amir, with you on that one?
I want to take I was an engineer, and from my perspective, it was a programmatic approach, which is where is the most amount of pain and what's the most tested technology. So if I was an engineer, probably Cursor would be one of my first choices, because there's a big community, there's a lot of developers talking about it. There's a big need to I don't need to want to do all these small pieces of code. I want to focus on the specification and on the things that I'm trying to build. and I will go from there. Then there's like the outliers, like the what's called vibe coding, which I would try to test to see if it meets my criteria, my demands. So like if I want to like I would look at my specification at the PRD or like what I'm trying to build and see if I could do a prototype using one of these solutions like Bolt or Base and test the waters. So on the one side, I would go and see what is the most common, most tested, most trusted solution. I would try to bring it into my production. And on the other end, I would leave maybe 20% to experimentation with the things that are the most hot and interesting. So an example would be a friend of mine just tested an MCP server. They said, "Hey, everybody's talking that it's like the new blue. It will solve all our problems," and it actually did not solve any of his problems. He tried it, it failed miserably, and he moved on. So I think like when you have these type of new waves, go to the trusted and well tested, but also keep an eye on what's progressing all the time. That's why I think this map is so important, because I can go back to it every week, every month to see what's changed, what I could retest and see.
Yeah, and the trusted aspect here is super important, like, because not everything always works as we expect it to, and is not always as reliable. In fact, I did a podcast episode yesterday where we played with both Bolt and Base 44. Amir, you mentioned Base 44 a while back to me, and I hadn't had a chance to try it out until yesterday. My first problem was I kept calling it Base 64, but once I got over that problem, I thought it was slow. It was a lot slower than Bolt, but it was, oh my god, it was amazing when I actually got the result straight away from my first play. As part of the podcast, I gave that to someone else. They gave me their Bolt version of the app, and we used Cursor and Windsurf to then progressively develop. And then you started seeing the problems that were created that you didn't realize were problems initially. And my good friend Frank, who in fact I did meet up with in Austin at that time. Apologies, Amir. But Frank comes back with a very important lesson here, which ultimately is things are going to screw up. And when we talk about pulling things into production, whether it's hallucination, whether it's just AI getting things wrong, we aren't living in that world where we just expect this, this vibe coding tool to come back and say, here's the answer, and it's going to be completely bulletproof. How do we best deal with that? Tracy, I'll start with you. I think
I'm chomping at the bit. I get so excited about this. So before you sprinkle AI onto your software development lifecycle, you better know how well and how healthy your software development lifecycle is. Are you leveraging any kind of DevSecOps principles? And the reason I say that is that that's our safety net. That's a part of our safety net. Ultimately, anything that is generated, right? There's lots more AI than generative AI, but that's where our hype cycle is right now. So we're kind of doubling down and focusing on that. Anything that's created by generative AI is now owned by a human. So if it came from your development environment through your tooling and goes into your repo, you own it, and you have to take responsibility for that. That also means that you need to be paying attention. This is where we get into some challenges with newer in career who don't know when that code is bad, or that test is bad, or that requirement doesn't meet the mustard, or it just don't have that experience yet. What's interesting is some of my research shows that the more senior people who use these tools trust it less, but are more efficient and more productive because they know to be pragmatic. I know I can't trust that. And so therefore I pay attention to it. So there are additional technologies that we leverage to help us to make the generative AI underpinnings better. We don't just use a generative AI model directly, right? We use RAG, we use graph RAG, we use other rules that we're bolting on and around them. So we're coming to a point where we're getting better with those things, but at the end of the day, the humans still own it. But I want to foot stomp on something that Amir said, and that is, he really just outlined architectural trade-off, right? Understanding your context. When should I do this? How should I do this? Well, don't rush. First thing, Patrick hears me say this all the time, pump the brakes. Think about what you're trying to do. Are you in a lab where you have a lot of latitude to make mistakes, and you don't have to worry about data leakage and other things? Your profile for that is a lot different than if I say that sometimes I work in the government space. Maybe we're working with, a weapon system. It's going to be a whole lot different what that profile looks like, because there can be no mistakes. So it depends. There is no one-shot answer other than AI is software, and we're adding more software into our software development lifecycle. So pause, think about what you're doing, and be aware of your unique context. So Amir, if there had been like a like button when you were talking, I would have hit that.
I love that, because it's true for every time that we have this type of revolution. I wrote an open source project for decentralized computing in the early thousands, and one army called me and said, "Hey, we want to use you for our submarines," and I'm like, "No, don't use it. It's not safe. Don't do it." So like taking and looking at, even if it's open source, you have to apply really thoughtful connection between what are your requirements and what is the software tested for. So thank you, Trace.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's actually a really interesting comment that's also come through, which is Andrew in response to Frank, and Frank's also replied as well, saying, how different is that to humans who are also non-deterministic? And we kind of, this is a really interesting comment, because I also feel like if you take something like, Tracy just mentioned, if there's a weapon system, of course, it needs to be like, there needs to be zero faults in that. There needs to be, we can't afford there to be problems in that kind of thing. I always look at self-driving cars as a really interesting thing as well, because we hold AI to a far higher bar, we require a far lower rate of failure for AI than we would a human. For example, the number of road accidents that occur could be massively, dramatically, you would think, I'll caveat myself, reduced because of self-driving cars. However, as soon as there's an accident with a self-driving car, it's going to hit the news. We're going to really kind of look into that and root cause analysis that problem as to what caused that issue. Patrick, as a non-deterministic human yourself, can we rely upon AI to identify issues in itself? There are a ton of tools that are added into the landscape framework, whether it's code review, whether it's testing. Can we use AI to be AI's safety net?
Yes, but I first want to come back to the comment saying, well, AI, we need to treat it differently. Okay, you copy and paste anything from Stack Overflow, like try it, like you still have to understand what good looks like. Whether that was generated by AI or not, it doesn't matter, right? So kind of that brings up the risk, as Tracy mentioned, like you have to see what's your risk, what your appetite is. Within AI applications, there is the concept of how do you test the applications, and it's called evaluations. And a lot of people think that this will just replace the way how people are doing testing. So instead of just writing the exact test, they write like the AI test equivalent to this. But guess what? If you start building that test harness on, this is the input, it goes through something with AI, this is the output, and we're fine-tuning the prompt, we're fine-tuning the logic. The problem is you might never get to 100% perfect of your test cases. And that is a fundamental difference in how you do actually releases. Because in the past, we said, if all our tests pass, then let's go to our production, and we put on that CI/CD and kind of like put all there. Now, what you see is if you somewhere put AI into the mix, and you don't know whether it's going to be good and it's going to be perfect, there is a risk decision to be taken by a human. And look, the one thing is, generated by a human, but then have the human decide to go to a production. Because what do? If it's 97% okay, are we releasing? So you come back to like your risk profile. Maybe for these functions, that's okay. For that, no, we won't do that. So that's risk profile. And the funny thing is developers can't do that. Like risk profile, it's the product owner. They know the business part and they have to make the decisions. Now, you will see a lot of the tool vendors say, hey, we got code generated. We'll just use AI to check whether it was done. That was one way of doing it. Or now with the MCP craze, let's hook it up into linters, security checkers, and all that. All good, right? Definitely an improvement. There's some additional tests and safety nets that we're building in, but we don't know whether that's going to be sufficient. And inherently to the technology, we can't be certain. So even as much as they want us to believe, we can't do that. And that's why there will have to be a loop by a human who says, that's where we go, or we don't go. That doesn't scale. So that's kind of the scary part that nobody tells you.
Well, some people tell us. You're telling us, right? Some people tell us. In the interim, in the short term, as much as people want to talk about productivity, and they talk about it in terms of Patrick's productivity or Amir's productivity or Tracy's, we don't measure productivity based on an individual. We base it on a team or an organization's ability to deliver valuable, working, secure software into their production environment. So, we have to get the measures right. But Patrick is spot on that we're not talking about the fact that in the near term, the super near term, the short term today, if you're adopting a new tool, it's going to take more time. If you're adding AI in as a tool into your existing software development lifecycle, things change. Your metrics are going to waver. People are going to panic about it because something changed. Why did it change? Well, you've introduced something. It's no different than if you go back a long ways and you say that, okay, we're all going to use, was it Visual Studio, Visual Teams, right? And all of a sudden that was wildly integrated and people couldn't quite navigate the right way, but everything was all in the right place. Here's the requirements and I can have my traceability. It caused us to go slower for a while until we understood where we could trust it, what were our best practices, leading practices for us to be able to use it. This is no different. It's going to take us a little bit of time. We are not in the perfect position right now. We are in emerging mode right now, plus hype. We'll just put the hype right over there. But we're in that emerging place right now. And it is going to be how we help to knit those things together, how we bring forward where the problems are and start talking about the actual challenges that we're trying to solve. To Amir's original point, the heck are you trying to do? Are you really just trying to generate faster code? Because we can do that. We definitely can do that. Is that really what you're looking for? Or are you looking for value, increasing your stability, right? Looking at adding this into your production environment to be gathering your operational telemetry, to be feeding back in, right? To understand how to do a better job with the software up front. There's so much to this. And Patrick is right. We don't talk about the extra time that it takes today. After a while, this is humans in the loop, right? So I'm using it. I'm part of the loop. I'm part of that. We will get to a point where we can demonstrate, and it's called calibrated trust. It's between human and machines, where we get to a point where we know that we can trust it in a certain way. And so when we get to that point of calibrated trust, we'll see the humans go from being in the loop to kind of being on the loop, peering down at it with transparency into it, with the ability to say, up, stop, as opposed to today, which is phase gate. So it's going to be a different operational mode once we get there. Over.
Right.
I even saw that. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say calibrated trust is my new favorite term, by the way, but go ahead, Amir.
So I've seen it in action with one of the startups that I've looked at recently. And what they've done is that they basically build an SRE as an AI, software reliability engineer. And what they did is that they said, we're going to still wake up the engineer in the middle of the night if something crashes, but we're going to run a playbook. And if we run that playbook enough and it solves the problem well enough, we'll offer that human to run that playbook automatically next time and not to wake them up before we run the playbook, but we'll wake them up if the playbook doesn't actually executes right. So
Amir, what group was that? That sounds really familiar. What company was that, or what tool was that?
I'll find if I can share that, and I'll share that later on. But I think that area where we're slowly building trust, to Trace comment, is the way to go. And also with workloads, we're going to see companies taking non-mission critical workloads and using them as a test bed for new technologies, because nobody wants to put right now an AI new framework in the middle of your bank account or managing transactions in health. You want to do it with the things that are not mission critical. And as time passes, that's another axis for trust. We will go from non-mission critical workloads to mission critical workloads.
And so there's a couple of things that we brought up there that are really interesting. One being, I guess we've talked a little bit about the risk, and we talked a little bit about the kind of like the speed of adoption that we can use for these tools, and the fact that it will slow us down to make us go faster, hopefully at some point in the future. If we think about we talked a little bit about kind of like startups there as well, and various different banks. I think if we talk about the types of organizations that are most suited to try as much as we can to try and get the majority of your organization to roll out and to adopt these larger these larger new workflows. A really good question that's kind of come in as well to tie this together from Frank here as well. Frank's talking about recognizing the risk, recognizing the value, and kind of like at least understanding that before pushing out to a large enterprise. When we think about the speed at which we need to roll things out, to identify risk, is it fair that an enterprise should potentially wait a little bit to understand which tool is going to be really providing that best value, understanding what scenarios they should be using it in before trying to roll out, to try and avoid that slowdown in productivity? Or is AI potentially offering enough right now that would be stupid not to try and get that early step up? But also, when we think about the risk, is a startup largely more immune to risk? Because, like you say, the vast majority of startups aren't necessarily in the firing line for hundreds, thousands, millions of transactions per day on whether it's military, whether it's finance moving across. Amir, from your point of view, I guess, seeing a lot of investment in startups and things like that, who are you seeing really adopting these kind of tools, and who are you seeing willing to accept that kind of risk more?
So I think I see it both in enterprise and in startups, but in different areas. Startups are willing to bet the farm on AI solution. They're saying, hey, all our engineers are now using 60% of their code are using AI. We built our prototype on vibe coding. And because they're in a stage where their major risk is not to be even successful with their product, and there's not a lot of like operational risk or security risk, the biggest risk is that nobody knows or cares about them. So they need to rapidly prototype. They can take a lot. The risk profile is much lower in terms of like, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. That's why we call it MVP, because it's minimal and it's maybe viable and it's a product. So I think for startups are a very good candidate for early stage. And then what you see in big enterprises is non-mission critical workloads. So like marketing are adopting solutions where they could build multiple websites for landing pages. Very low risk. Maybe there's like a button, no data is collected, no PII information and stuff like that. So a low risk profile within an enterprise. Maybe I love I'm seeing a lot of like ops people using AI. So I'm a RevOps, I'm a DevOps. I need to run scripts. If I run it twice and it doesn't work, I'll run it 3 times. Okay, so I don't care about mission criticality. The outcome should be important, and I have a lot of work to do. So I'm using those AI tools, but I can have a human in the loop that could actually drive a lot of the value themselves. So what I'm seeing in startups is that their core is AI, and that might drive a lot of value to them because their risk profile is different. And in enterprises, it's a lot of the peripheral software that is created rather than the core software that is created.
I would add to that is that it's not per se big and small. So if you're a big company and all your competitors are threatening your business because they are applying AI, there is a kind of big discussion and a need for speed there as well. Now, they might struggle to introduce it, and then you have the whole discussion about like, oh, we should act as a startup within the enterprise, and we give you more like special privileges, or kind of like we kind of shield you off of certain things, kind of like the incubator within an enterprise as well. So that's definitely happening, and it's similar to, you apply the risk and then you try to contain it, even if in those relatively slow-moving environments, because whatever you do is rippled across the whole org, is containment, right? That's the same pattern that you're seeing, and that competitive thing has pushed so many enterprises just to go. And even the big players, kind of the cloud vendors, they've all been taken by this. They were all scrambling, and they're not small, right? So that push. Obviously, if you don't have a push by your customers and you're making money regardless, okay, you can kind of sit this one out and see whatever happens.
I think there's one more piece to add on to it, and depending on who our audience is today listening, and that's actually the age of the organization. And the reason I say that is that some of the commercial organizations I work with, if you think about fintech, they've got decades and decades and decades of software. So where do they apply it? Their use case for applying it might be looking at helping them to understand COBOL or Ada that's still running, that's running well, but they have to make changes to it or they have to modernize it. So the way that I might leverage it there be completely different than if I'm thinking about a new feature, a new capability, a new website, right? And something else, a mobile app. So back to Amir's context. There are lots of different use cases, and it's more than code gen. So I know that it feels like we come back to code generation. That's only one piece of the puzzle. There's so much more in the data that we can gather and the models that we can train, more than language models, by the way, that we can train to help us, especially with our production environments.
Absolutely. And I think the example that you actually give there, whereby people are either trying to translate from one maybe language to another, or trying to understand what a code base is doing that's maybe legacy, or create tests around those legacy. I've seen people be really, really successful with that style of work, maybe even more so than generated coding and things like that.
I've had somebody say that we have no place to go. We're in this position. We are already at risk. This may help us to reduce our risks. So in some cases, bringing in that tool in a particular, very focused mechanism, right? Exactly how we're going to do it, how we're going to measure that we're getting better at whatever that is. Sometimes it's absolutely worth that risk to reduce a different risk.
Absolutely, and I think you hit a nerve with Frank. It's worth saying there is also Fortran as well, but you're right, Frank. So a couple of things.
There's enough technical depth in any company, like regardless of whether it's the modern technology or not. It's like there's always cleanup to be done, right? And there's the hope that we can kind of get through that, like also faster in whatever way. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on the kind of topic of not forgetting the past, Patrick, there's a couple of questions that have come in. First of all, this one, hello from Belgium, which I think is very, very suitable for you, Patrick. The second one, big admirer, Patrick. Your past just doesn't leave you, Patrick, talking about DevOps and things like that. And we were talking a little bit about their operations and things like that. A really interesting aspect of this, I guess, is AI can often be seen as this kind of like black box that you give it some input, it does something, spits out some output, and sometimes that's okay when it's kind of generating some code that we can then later run some testing on or validation on and things like that. Now, when we're in the CI/CD pipeline, when we're maybe even monitoring production and things like that, we need answers to kind of like be explainable, be auditable, right? How do we deal with that, Patrick, through the pipeline, so that we can truly audit and truly understand how not just how, but why decisions are being made?
Well, I think it's introducing right now a lot of helpers, right? So you merge something in, all of a sudden there's like 7 bots who will kind of like check your security, check your documentation, kind of give feedback of what you do, right? So that's one thing. Now, imagine then you're writing your code. The next phase could be, okay, let me suggest a fix or something that we learned. So that's kind of another kind of helpful thing that most of the bots are helping you, and then even like already run it for you to see whether it was already successful or it did fix something. And that's just like passing the gates of the CI/CD and helping you pass those things. Now, there's always the danger that it suggests like remove the function and you're done. So you still have to kind of review whatever it suggests. That's like knowing what good looks like. Now, a lot of people, especially when they get into more like vibe coding or other, is that all of a sudden there's like a big rewrite happening. And that's also a risk about, you do have to have tests. And there's some irony that AI actually drives us to write more tests to capture things, and not just the functional test, but also capture that whatever has been changed that is not being removed or done that. So thank you, AI, for helping us to kind of drive more testing. Now then in production, imagine you go through, there's a lot of questions about incident indeed, like explain me the incident, what has changed. We have a lot of context in our CI/CD pipelines that we can use. Why was this done? Who did this? Should we do it again? And there's also the similar fix cycle of agents giving advice of whatever we hit in production there as well, and that kind of feeds back into the production. Now, is this autonomous? I would not trust my life in this, like not for a long time, I think, for a couple of years, but given in certain constraints and like certain areas, that does make sense, and it will just be more helpful. One example is you kind of fix something, had something in the chat, had some comments, that is kept into memory. So when the next person comes around, that is helpful and explained again, and why we're doing this, why we should not be changing this file and stuff. So kind of that knowledge buildup is also something I think is pretty important. It's not about the code gen, it's like the process and keeping track of why we do these things, and then apply this and into whatever piece that we're doing. Because people forget, there's a history, we can't hold every of that like information in our head, and that's super helpful during a CI/CD as well.
Yeah,
I want to double down on that and just say that like the current situation is the worst that it's going to ever be, the most expensive that it's going to ever be. I had a conversation with Vince Cerf, one of the forefathers of the internet, and he said like he held the first cellular phone. It was too heavy because you couldn't hold it more than like 30 seconds, but the battery lasted for 30 seconds, so that was okay. And the point is now we have amazing phones. So I think everything that Patrick has said is very accurate, but the pace that the improvements are happening is progressing really, really, really fast. So we used to have AI that changed all the code because you asked it to change a single button, and then you had to run all your tests again and again and again. And now I'm seeing frameworks that tell the AI, hey, just focus on this piece of code. Don't change everything in the site to change the color of the button. So we're seeing more and more structure and guardrails. So I think I'm very optimistic on the direction that this is taking.
I want everybody to hear that a second time, that this is the worst that it will be. At least with the technologies that we understand, right? There's going to be something else on the horizon. We'll run into a future in a couple of years. We'll come back and talk about the future next worst thing. Security is something that we need to stay focused on, regardless as to your industry. It is absolutely possible. I've demonstrated it way too many times in way too many forums to generate code that has security flaws in it. There are techniques that are negative, right? That nefarious in nature. So we have to be doubling down on the security of our code. And I consider security, based on my background, security is part of quality. So you can't have quality software if it's not secure. So, but we do need to be doubling down on that piece in particular, especially depending on your context, right? If you may not have as big a security footprint or profile as the next company or corporation or agency, but be aware that security right now is in a dangerous place when it comes to not just the generation of code, but when it comes to leveraging these models. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. It's going to get better. And you need to be aware right now.
And I think that's a really, sorry, Patrick, I was just gonna kind of say, years ago, well, not years ago, but well, maybe a couple of years ago, when LLMs really came to the forefront and everyone was thinking about trying it out, security used to be every other word, right? Where it was like, oh, can I use this model? Do I have permission, but from my corporation or company or organization to use this model? These days, there are kind of like, we kind of like understand what we should and shouldn't do, but security is very rarely spoken about in compared to a couple of years ago. And it's almost like that familiarity that we have with AI these days is kind of like we almost are too attuned to ignore some of the security aspects, just assuming things are okay. Patrick, I think I cut you up there.
No, I was going to say that somebody asked me the question, what if you look back in 5 or 10 years, like what lessons do you think we should kind of have taken, or what is one of the risks? And I replied with the fact that if there's going to be a period where AI is, let's say, 95% okay, right? And we're just going to assume that it's most of the time okay. And then we're just going to accept the one time it's not going to be okay. There's a certain irony of, in the automation is the more you automate, the less you understand. And then you kind of get this. Now that's the most dangerous period. Right now, we all know it's not perfect. But then there's that moment, that's where I'm worried about. And I hope we get the guardrails and maybe about like architecting differently. You see the agents that have checkpoints, they have rollbacks. So anything that allows us to do maybe like some safe fallback, some safe situation, that's going to be an interesting kind of follow-up as it gets better, is that we have to make sure that we can still deal with the failure if we don't see it happening. And that's like the observability lesson and so on, also from DevOps in kind of any automation that we've done before.
Yeah. Awesome. We have, I don't know how long we've got left. I kind of said 45 minutes. We're just over 50 now, but this has been great chat. Let's run for a few more minutes and we'll say, final question. I'd love to hear the answers from all three of you on this one. It's time to get that crystal ball out and predict how the landscape, specifically the landscape, is going to change. And I guess a couple of questions which will maybe prompt some thoughts. I guess, do you feel like our categorization? In fact, let me bring back up the landscape. Switch tabs. So right now, I guess if we come here, you can see kind of we're thinking about it very, very much still from the workflow of software development, requirements design, then into code, then into QA, then into DevOps, DevSecOps, and a bit of AI engineering, more into the observability and things like that. How do you feel this landscape is really going to change? Are we going to step away from maybe more of an SDLC approach? How should we be thinking of this more natively, I guess, to bring the AI native bit into the future? Why don't we start? Why don't we start with no one's unmuted? Let's start with Amir.
Oh, well, I'm much better in predicting the past than predicting the future. I
and
think
sometimes even that's hard to do.
That's very hard to do, definitely. I think some of the stuff that we'll see, there's a few potential features that I can talk about. One of them is what's called synthetic humans. I think Ryan Hoover from Product Hunt, the founder of Product Hunt, coined that, which is like for each of these product aspects, you actually have a human today that is usually responsible for that. So we might see the emergence of synthetic humans in the workforce, where you have your tester as a user in Slack that is basically it's an AI persona that does all the testing, and you talk to it, and it's sometimes not as stochastic because humans are that's what we expect of humans to be. So that's one angle. I'm really excited about the thought of having organic software, where software actually measures the outcome and then changes itself as time passes. So let's say a website that aims to sell something, and it sees that we did a study at Google where the colors, people love the color of their flags. So it learns that fact. It learns that humans really like the colors of the flag, so it changes the color of the website based on the location of the IP of the human where they come from. So like for Belgium, they'll show the Belgian flag so that Patrick will buy more. I'm interested in this type of world where the AI is basically like an organic engine for the software, where based on the outcomes, it could actually change. So maybe I'm not talking about what's happening in the near future, but I'm really excited about this type of behavior that software can enable.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And I think that the guardrails then become a million times more important with those kind of, with that level of automation and autonomy, with the agentic kind of change. Patrick, you're unmuted next. Why don't we jump to you?
Yeah. Well, Amir, I'm colorblind, so it will be fun for me to see what colors they like for me, like one of the things, it's not like the big prediction, but I know, agents is right here, MCP tooling with agents right here. What I find interesting is the trend of longer running async things. That kind of, how do we deal with that? So that's something that puzzles me. Is it going to be helpful? You let it code for a day, comes back to you. like, how do you deal with that? So that's one thing I'm curious about. And the second thing is, now you see all these fragmented tools, and we talked about, maybe they become like a platform or something, or like one eats all the others as a tool, or they become more integrated. That kind of historical knowledge of all the tools, whatever they saw in the whole org, that kind of knowledge capturing, that memory, that consolidation across the tools is another like fascinating area. If you can bring all these pieces together with whatever agent, whatever they can use as a memory, and that it's not just siloed, as Tracy said, but it is definitely like more integrated as whatever we learned in this company and how we do things around here. So those are definitely two trends that I'm looking forward to, like how they evolve. I botched the bullet by not saying what the future is.
Well, as the curator of the landscape, Patrick, you'll be the one doing it, so I'm sure you'll find out one way or another. Tracy.
I know we only have a few moments left, and this is someplace where I spend a lot of my time, is looking over the horizon, not what's happening in the next 6 months, 12 months, or 18 months, but how far is it going to go? Right now, our digital workforce, we don't have enough people in our digital workforce. Yes, folks are getting downsized and moved around, but we don't have all that we need. So Patrick has heard me say this before, that we're going to have to enhance our digital workforce by having what I call digital workers. So they are actually those autonomous AI agents, autonomous personas. That's not here today. In some small measure, it is. In some small measure, it is. But take that forward into the future. What am I going to be doing? I'm going to be worried about that digital platform that enables all of those digital workers to be doing all of these things we're talking about, that take us towards what Amir mentioned, which is what I call the software flywheel. He's calling it organic software. Love that term. Hadn't heard that before. There's an existing concept called the machine learning flywheel, where the more information that the machine learning algorithm is aware of, it becomes self-training and self-learning. So start to apply that to software. So as software not just gets smarter about the user experience, but as the AI organism, the AI digital platform, as that bigger thing becomes aware of what the original vision was, what it ended up creating, how that was leveraged, what the telemetry was like, how it had to fix it, and starts to feed that back in, we're going to see this beautiful flywheel. Now, how far away is that? Gosh, I would have said that the AI agents 18 months ago, I would have said that they're 3 years out. So I'm not going to give you a time frame, but I am going to say that the writing is on the wall with what we're seeing already. Agentics is the first next step, and human machine teaming, understanding how we're going to allow agents, how we're going to allow autonomous technologies to make decisions at a certain point, is really where I'm focused right now. Is how do we help us to get the right amount of trust? Because don't just trust it, right? Amir said that earlier. Can't just trust it, but you can start to learn where it's appropriate to trust it. So there you go. Let's look back in a bit, right?
Awesome. Yeah, no, wonderful to think that far out, and yeah, we'll see when that becomes a reality. But I agree with your outlook. Yeah, we're pretty much at time. That flew by. I really love the discussion and everyone jumping in, and actually in particular as well. Thank you so much for everyone, both on YouTube and LinkedIn for all your questions. It was great to chat. Yeah, make sure you subscribe. Go to AI Native Dev. We have a ton of content, news, podcast episodes. We've got an amazing conference coming up in a couple of weeks. If you're in London, by the way, and you're going to DevOps UK, come stop by and say hello. I'll be there. Patrick will be there. Dion will be there. Myself and Dion are giving the closing keynote. Sammy Hepburn will be there as well. Patrick and I are also doing some workshops. So come say hi. And then the AI Native DevCon will also be the week later, which is a virtual conference. And it's free to join, and there'll be a ton of amazing sessions there as well. The only thing I'll leave on is just to say the landscape is open, so you can send some pull requests. There is a form, you can add tools, you can update tools. Let's keep this up to date together. Let's do this as a community, because I don't think any one person or group can do this by themselves. So this is a great community effort that we're trying to get as many people involved as we can. And with that, look at that, bang on time. I'll say a massive thank you to well, let's see if I can get some names back up, or maybe I need to remove the banner. That's what it is. There we go. A massive thank you to Tracy Benon. A massive thank you to Patrick Debois and Amir Shvat for all your insights and joining us for this wonderful discussion. Hope to have another one maybe sometime soon in the future as well. Massive thank you, and thanks all for listening as well. And speak to you again next time. Bye for now.
Bye, guys.